See? Try to stop this feedback coming from but yeah, like I say, something's really giving me bad feedback. I don't know what it is. But yeah, we're here this week to talk about listening to your body to heal yourself. Rowan, are you there? Are you able to get this started? Because I know you've got a big message box.
Yeah, can you hear me okay now? Is that clear? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think listening to your body to heal yourself, it's an interesting one. I've certainly gone through this. As some of you guys know, I've sort of had quite a serious lung disease a few years ago, and I shut down my body with negative self-talk. I'm fully aware of that. But on the healing recovery from that, the healing road from that, I did a lot of this sort of starting to tune into my body. So over and above what we do with our clients and getting them to speak to and listen to their body and, start to cultivate that relationship where you are listening to that sort of intuitive voice within yourself and going along with some of the things from that. So yeah, this is a big one for me.
That's great to hear as well. I've managed to figure out now where I was going wrong. So just in case anyone's wondering, we're actually using a program tonight called Club Deck. It's an online application which works just like your phone, but it means you can just use better microphones and stuff like that as well. So Rowan, obviously, when you was going through this sort of journey, when was it that you actually started to notice whether talking and listening to your body was significant that it could make the changes?
I think really it's something that I've been in tune with since I was a kid. My father was an energy healer and a herbalist sort of by training, so he was very good at sort of teaching us to train our intuition. But it always seemed to be round the wrong way when I was a kid. I would wait for things instead of when I was coming home from school or stuff like that, I would just wait at the bottom of the road some days, and my mum would already have gone home. And then the days when I walked home, it seemed to be the days that she was still at work. So the sort of intuition felt like it was the wrong way around when I was a kid. But after sort of getting really ill and being really quite depressed after my father's passing, I got this infection in my lungs, and it was pretty much instantly, as soon as I sort of made it quite clear to my body mind that no, I want to stay here. That was when it started seemingly giving me information, and I would have dreams about types of food to eat. Like the initial idea to actually go into a ketogenic state was really from a dream about what goes moldy in my fridge, and all the sugary foods go moldy in your fridge. And it was like I woke up knowing that I needed to stop sugar, so I went into a ketogenic state, and it was that really sort of caused a shift in my healing and my ability to sort of get on top of this fungal infection that was eating my lung tissue. So it was pretty much instant. I don't know if anyone else has had any experiences like this.
That for me is pretty brilliant. Now, I've had something not quite as much of a message as that, but I remember when I wanted to lose weight after I had a session at Gisborne, I was on a fitness plan. But I just remember all of a sudden, when I was like 30-year-old back then, so I was starting to feel the aches and pains and things like that. But I was doing full-blown circuit sessions, and I don't know where all this extra energy come from, but in the back of my mind I was just saying I can push myself more, and even against like 18, 19, 24-year-olds, whatever it may be, I was able to lead the way quite strong, which wasn't usually my natural sort of approach to fitness. I was usually one of the behind ones. I don't know whether it was the condition to how I was perceived with the lessons that we're doing, or the position of me in the room to my age and stuff, and maturity and things. But yeah, I definitely listened to my body to be able to push me further and realise where I can achieve stuff. And I think another thing like that comes along to kinesiology. Actually, Adam, we haven't heard much. Have you ever used kinesiology to work the way with things?
Never kinesiology. I think I had a similar-ish experience to Rowan in the sense that there was a point in my late teenage years, where I was kind of all of the psychosomatic issues that I've kind of, I would say I'm in really good health now. I've been running my business for about 20 years. I've not had a single sick day. And I make that clear to all my staff. I remind them I've never had a sick day. So when they have one, they kind of know that I'm not expecting them to get sick. But when I was in my late teenage years, I developed a rash all over my face. And that really knocked my confidence. And there was lots of other things that were kind of, interlinked. There would be things that affected my confidence, and because my confidence went down, that increased anxiety, and then that led to more health issues. And for me, that was kind of like the worst part of my life. But it was intuition in many ways that made me think, right, and a belief system. I didn't want to see GPs. I didn't want to get help from pills and potions and that kind of stuff. I wanted to get to the root cause of it rather than just treat the symptoms. And that, led me to radically changing my diet and radically changing my approach to exercise. And those key things back then as a teenager have continued for my whole life. And I think had it not have been for that kind of detrimental health things, I wouldn't have made those changes. But it was key things: food, exercise, and like mental health, really, in terms of inner dialogue, that really had an impact on that kind of stuff. But nobody told me that. I had to kind of figure it out, and it kind of came from within. And I think that element of two things, really: inner dialogue, but also keeping a journal. And I think keeping a journal was a helpful vehicle for me to connect with my intuition, to kind of figure out what changes that I need to make. And as woo-woo as it sounds, actually finding at least 5 things every day to be grateful for actually did shift my emotional state so that my health started to improve. And I don't know that it was gratitude that did that, but it certainly changed my focus.
That's brilliant. And obviously just being able to share that and change it. And I think it's quite an interesting thing, and I'm sure others as well have actually got the thing of never having a sick day, because it's your own business as well. I've got a friend who's recently started his own gym, and he hasn't even took a single wage yet, and he's been running it now for about 4 or 5 months. And it just goes to show, when it's your own pride of what can be achieved. Does that say that other people sometimes have sick days because they get run down in different, any of them different things? Or is it just a positive mentality of knowing that it's your business that keeps you pushing forward to them sick days every single day?
I've got a theory on this, Graham. I've got a theory on this, because there was this weird thing that would happen, and it doesn't happen anymore, but for the first 10 years that I was running a business, and I was working like 13, 14-hour days, quite often in the weekends, never had a sick day. But then on the very few occasions, so we would shut down for Christmas, like a good 10 days off over Christmas, that's when I would get sick. That's when I would get, a sniffle or a cold. Having a holiday, actually getting some sunshine, there where I would be lying on a beach, and then suddenly I get that headache and I get that kind of real tiredness. And basically, I think it's my unconscious mind knowing that, hold on, there's rules here, there's boundaries. You are not allowed to get sick while you're working on the business. But in this time off, yeah, that's okay. And maybe my body needed it to recover in some way. It just knew that it wasn't allowed to fucking get sick when I needed it, to be. Because on certain cases, if I wasn't fully alert, I couldn't open the office. People couldn't turn up to work. There would be detrimental consequences if I wasn't physically there. And for me now, I look at it, and that was kind of like, that was a very clear post-hypnotic suggestion, and expectation. I'm not allowed to get sick, so I didn't get sick. It's a weird thing. It doesn't sound like it should make any sense, but that's how it kind of worked.
I can 100% relate to this, especially with the military life. If anyone ever has to go sick in the military, until you're a senior NCO, so a sergeant and above, you have to drag your ass to the doctors every single time to go and report sick at 8 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, I think that's pretty brilliant, really. And I can 100% relate to you there, because there's been so many times I have my annual leave, summer or Christmas, and yeah, I just end up wrapped up in the covers. And in some cases, it's the same with my wife, with her being a teacher. She never wants to be ill around the kids and other things as well like that. So yeah, again, it's very strange. Rowan, have you got anything you can relate to with that?
Yeah, this is actually talked about in Tony Robbins' Living Health seminars. He talks about this, and it's to do with apparently the fact that we're under stress when we're working, whether it's good stress or bad stress. But I think if we are in that sort of state of stress, it does suppress the immune system. So when we get into a state where we can relax finally on the beach or at Christmas or whatever it is, that's when our body goes, all right, time to clean all this junk out that's sitting in our system. It gets to work cleaning it all. And it's that, we quite often forget that the symptoms that we get from colds and flus and things like that are actually the clearing out of the dead virus cells and things like that from our system rather than the actual impact of the virus itself. So it's that cleaning out phase that we do. But again, shows us that we should be listening to our body and maybe taking a little bit more time to rest if we are getting those sort of real lags where we're having to, deal with being ill when we have a weekend off or a holiday or something like that. Maybe we should cut back on the hours that we're putting into our job a little bit. I don't know if anyone else in the audience has got anything they want to add to this. If you do, just hold your hand up.
I was going to say, raise your hand if you've got any kind of interesting anecdotes of times when you've listened to your body that helped you in some way, like that intuition made a different choice relating to your health, well-being. Maybe, there was something intuitive that led you to get some kind of checkup or scan. It's weird, the unconscious ability to kind of pick up on things that we don't know consciously. If you've got any thing you want to share like that, any examples, any points, any questions, raise your hand. But on that point, Rowan, of your immune system, is quite often what we interpret as sickness is actually it doing the fixing. I think anyone that has changed their diet and suddenly cut sugar, it feels horrible. You have headaches, you feel really tired. That's your body getting better. And I think sometimes there is this weird paradox that people don't stick to healthy things because the withdrawals of that feel unpleasant, and maintaining the unhealthy thing is what actually keeps people in cycles of bad habits and addictions. So sometimes there's a paradox that we have to get through the tunnel to the light at the end of it before we actually realize what good health and well-being is. Rich, welcome up on the stage. Do you have a question or a point?
No, good evening, everybody, or good day to wherever you are. Just a point for you is on Clubhouse at 1500 UK time, there's a room about cold showers and the health benefits of that. One chap, he gave an example, I believe it was a associate of his, who suffers from MS, and he would take a cold bath, basically an ice bath, and within a certain amount of time, he would have hardly any symptoms of MS. He could walk normally. So it might be useful for him to look into. That's
very interesting indeed. And I also like what Adam just said a minute ago about how the brain can put other things in place and stuff as well. Because as many of you know, I wasn't here last week because I was away cavorting again this time at Wireless Festival, and both times, so with Reading and both with Wireless, after I finished this long weekend of working 14-hour shifts every day, plus maybe a little bit of partying afterwards or something, so with minimal sleep, and then coming back home, the sleep that I have for the next usually 2 to 3 days, my brain is still very much in that pattern of being back at that location. And I truly believe most of it is because my brain's trying to put a filter on everything that it's seen and everything it's interacted with for them last 3 days. And, if you think like 14 hours of stood in front of crowds, talking to all these different people, when I'm there, I perform magic and things as well. So I do a lot of interaction to build up a familiarity with me. So it makes my job easier when I'm there. To the point that when I'm coming home, I literally still dream that I can hear bands going on in the background and talking to people in the crowd. And it's literally like I am there again. And this is where, in some cases, I find like people with insomnia, with people with any sort of sleep deprivation illness, is very much that vicious circle. For whatever it may be, if it is PTSD or whatever it is, that person's trying not to to recreate them dreams again, but they've got no choice because the brain needs to filter and put them back into them said positions. Like I say, if anyone's got anything to challenge that, and this is literally just something that I experienced myself. Another thing, I'm sure I must have mentioned it in here before, and I briefly said it to Rowan before we started here. Another thing with listening to your body to heal yourself. I don't know about anyone else, but if I ever do weight loss sessions, one of the things I like to do is I get people to address their own size portion sizes. I get people to address drinking water, making them believe that it's the nicest version of water, whatever it is, whether it is a cold bottle of Evian, Baltic, whatever, but it's in a glass. I get people to vision that whenever they see stairs, they tell themselves to run up it. And then whenever I finish my session, I challenge that. I'll literally say, so imagine yourself going upstairs tomorrow, what do you think? And I just ask them for that first thing that comes out of their mind. And they'll say, run up it. I say, so are you going to listen to that from now on, or are you going to ignore it? And then, because literally my final passing message is, if you choose not to ignore it, you've just wasted a lot of money. And like I say, people who really take that on board and absolutely live by it are the ones who've gone and made substantial weight loss differences over their time. Same with foods. If people have been very picky with foods, changing that dialogue for the time being, and changing their beliefs of what they thought their brain used to say to something else as well. And I don't know if either of you gents or I've just seen Irene's up here. Actually, Irene, let's see what you'd like to share with us all this evening. Good evening.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear. Great to have you here.
Oh, lovely. Lovely to see you all as well. It's actually a great subject because I've been reading the book You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And that is all about, she is convinced that the body, what she said in the book is the body is always talking to us if we only take the time to listen, and every cell within your body responds to every single thought you think and every word you speak. So she's convinced that we create every so-called illness in our body through our mind. And I think we do have to listen to our body when there's some pain there or discomfort, because it's sending a message to say, take care of this part. This part isn't, there's something there that needs to be looked at. And I resonated there with what Rich said about the cold showers and things like that, because that's what I do. Sometimes I get lower back pain or muscular pain just from doing exercise, and cold showers just work so well on it. I also do cold water swimming, and I know some ladies that have fibromyalgia, and they swear by it for the pain relief. And yeah, just listen to your body and just being aware of it. And it's so good that just simple things like cold water can make such an impact on how your body feels. But I think it's tough to start with listening to it, because I caught a little bit of what Adam said at the start about listening to the body via intuition. It's always sending messages, and I feel that mine sends messages all the time in various ways, whether that's intuition or whether it's through pain or discomfort or sometimes making me ill to slow down as a message to slow down because I'm maybe doing too much. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
I mean, thanks for that, Irene. I mean, that's really, really useful to share. And just picking up on what Rich was saying before about the benefits of cold showers, I think nobody can watch some of the documentaries with Wim Hof and not be blown away by some of the physical feats that he's done and just how radically it can change things that are perceived to be not within conscious control. And I think one of the things that we have to accept that as a direct result of the modern Western diet, highly processed food, lots of sugar, lots of kind of processed meats, it has an inflammation impact on the body. And I think a lot of what we consider ill health and possible links to autoimmune issues, I mean, I already mentioned fibromyalgia there. The reality is inflammation is one of the consistent things that actually impacts people's bodies in a negative way. And whether it's change of diet, so you've got more high water content, whether it is the cold showers that Rich referred to and kind of ice baths, what's the similarity there? What's the consistent thing? It reduces inflammation. It changes, albeit temporarily, the pH levels in the human body. And I think once you've experienced that, even if you're distracted by everything else that's going on, your unconscious doesn't forget. And therefore, if you've had that experience once, of having ice cold shower, and guess what? You feel more alert, you feel better, it reduces inflammation, you've got more mobility. Well, your intuition is going to be trying to feed you back that information from that point onwards because it's effective. And I think there is a growing distrust, I think, of the medical profession that is trying to pump pills and potions. And the reality is the vast majority, not all, you do get functional doctors, functional medicine, but the vast majority of the medical profession is about pharmaceutical companies not trying to make people healthier, but trying to manage symptoms and sell pills and potions. And I think there's a growing distrust of that whole philosophy. And that's why people are exploring functional medicine from their own intuition. What happens when they eat more fruit and vegetables? What happens when they get more fresh air? What happens when they have these cold showers and do things in nature? Guess what? They feel better. And when they feel better, they tend to heal. And that, I don't think, is down to luck. I think it's a reconnection with we're humans, we're animals, we exist in nature. And actually, when you do natural things, you feel a lot better for it. I don't know if there's any thoughts from you guys, Graham, Rowan?
Yeah, just in regards to like the cold showers for starters, this is something my father used to do. He used to go and take a dip in the burn next to the house every day of the year. He would go and submerge himself in it, and he swore by it. And one of the things I started doing, I'd worked with breath before I got ill, but I really started working with it after I started getting sick. And I went from, I've lost a third of my lung tissue to this disease, so I've got COPD and emphysema as a result. And I went from under a minute breath retention to over 5 minutes breath retention using Wim Hof and cold showers in the space of about a month and a half, over 4 minutes in a month. So like working with this sort of stuff. And I think that the more that we actually start to speak to our body and tell our body what we want, the more it starts to communicate back with us in these subtle ways. And it really ties into the reticular activation system again, doesn't it? And the fact that the more information that we can load into our mind about things like plant medicine, herbs, things like that, and different ideas about stress and how the system works. There's a wonderful branch of medicine called German New Medicine that attributes different psychological traumas to different illnesses throughout the body. And it's remarkable if you start looking at that, the people that come to you with diseases and serious issues tend to have actually had the traumas in the area that German New Medicine will say that is associated with that particular problem. So it's fascinating when we start to look at this idea that really there is no separation of mind and body. So all issues within the body, all disease within the body has a mental element, even if that's just to do with the stress and anxiety caused with being ill, causing more inflammation in the body. And you see this with certain illnesses like things like FND and things like that. There seems to be a certain element of a feedback loop happening where once people get diagnosed with it, they become more stressed by it. And that in turn causes more inflammation in the body and worsens their symptoms. So it's a fascinating way to look at the whole mind-body system from that sort of that respect.
Yeah, totally. And actually, just before this clubhouse room, I was seeing a client with IBS and IBD. And obviously, for those that know, that's one of the few conditions that NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, actually do recommend hypnosis as a recommended treatment for that medical condition. The interesting thing about IBS is that it isn't a definable issue; it's a collection of symptoms. But the evidence suggests that hypnosis actually does have a positive impact on this. And the client that I was working with, without obviously breaking any confidentiality, had a really interesting loop, and that was because the IBS affected her bowel movements to the extent that she couldn't have confidence as to when she would need to go to the toilet. that would create anxiety, and that anxiety, that worry, that constant inner dialogue of vigilance, of protecting against an undesirable outcome, put her in a highly stressed emotional state where clearly there was, verging on panic. Well, what happens when your sympathetic nervous system kicks in this kind of fight, flight, or freeze response? Well, it's trying to preserve your essential organs, and your digestive system isn't seen as one of those. And therefore, you could argue there might even be a strategic advantage to have less weight that you're carrying in your bowels at that point. So it wouldn't surprise me if actually, paradoxically, the very psychological strategy to avoid an accident was inadvertently creating the outcome that she didn't want. And as hypnotists, we see these paradoxes, these loops all the time. I always use the example of people with the wasp phobia. Average person sees a wasp, they look at it and they see it fly by. Person with a phobia of wasp, flapping their hands, they're creating exactly the kind of outcome that increases the probability of them being stung. And you see this. How many people use cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs as a form of self-medication to deal with stress? And what is that doing to their body in terms of the symptoms of, so that sometimes the coping mechanism causes the health issues, which then creates more stress because then people are worried about their own physical health. And then that has a ripple effect, and it just gets them down and down in this thing. And I think what we can do as hypnotherapists, identify these kind of self-destructive loops and show them a different way out. And if they take that way out, well, then they get the immediate benefit, but they also get the mental health benefits of not having to worry about the very thing that is being caused as a coping mechanism from the very thing they're in, if I'm not getting a bit too kind of meta about this. Graham, what's your thoughts on this?
So, yeah, definitely everyone's got the ways of sharing and listening and everything as well. But one of the other things I wanted to bring to the table is something we spoke to each other about, I think it was last time we spoke actually, and that was the whole factor of not talking at all, living in the dark, whether it's I can't remember, is it gravity pools or the flotation pools? That's the one where people literally just go into a pool, close the lid, and spend X amount of time with nothing around them. Or like I also mentioned the lady who went on a retreat, and the retreat was as soon as she entered the gate, she couldn't speak to anyone for that whole week. Couldn't speak a single word. But yeah, she said how reinvigorating it is, how much it managed to change her life. Now, was that more because she was sat there talking to herself, listening to herself, being able to re-engage? Is it just because she managed to notice more around her without talking, or without producing a bias by talking, or by interjecting something? Because we all try not to look into people, but sometimes it's just built in, and that's what we do. So by being able to attend these, by being able to do that, it completely changed it to a different level. And it's quite interesting because, being a magician, if I'm doing magic, the best way to get the best reaction, because then it lets people think. And when people are thinking, believe it or not, 99% of the time they think wrong. They think they've seen something which they never even seen at all, and it creates magic. So what happens when we are actually not thinking about the things that we should be thinking about? Our brain creates magic, which then can, in turn, heal ourselves because of one reason or another. So, like I say, a bit of a different approach. But yeah, it's definitely, it's very interesting. I don't want to throw this over to Rowan actually, because Rowan, it's something you used a lot with part of your healing process, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've done silent retreats and things like that, and you do, if you're doing 10 days of noble silence where you have no eye contact and no words, you really start to tune into the body language of other people, and sitting and observing sensations within your own body. During that, you really start to tune in and open up awareness within the body as well. It's surprising how many clients come to you and they can't feel anything that's going on in their body. They've sort of shut it off and put it into out of conscious awareness, basically. And it really is, I think this is it sort of ties into I think it was was it Matt that was talking about this last week? The idea that consciousness is sort of fractal in nature, and you can zoom in and out. And I think that's really true in this respect, especially in speaking to your body mind and getting responses from the bodies. The more that we open up that awareness of the body itself, the more we start to get that communication happening. And I think you're right, the idea of creating pauses. You do it with the light machines that I work with, the Roxivas. They create that sort of pause in your mind that Adam's nodding his head there. And doing things like that, I'll open up that space. But pauses create transits. So when we're doing language, those pauses will create a stop within the client's mind. And that, I think, is really important, to just silence it for a moment and feel what's going on. I think one other thing that sort of popped in my head while you were talking as well is this idea of dream incubation. This is something that I've used quite a lot, is just having the intent, either doing a wake back to bed and having the intent to be lucid in dreams, or get a message about your health or shifts that you're wanting to make, whether they're the right thing or not. So working with things like that as a method of communication with the unconscious about these sort of things, I think would be really powerful as well.
But obviously this talk is about you in the audience right now. So do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any experiences that you want to share when it comes to intuition or listening to your body? And that doesn't have to be your intuition. I think sometimes listening to your body is observing things that are different from how they normally are. I mean, this is one of the key reasons to have a checkup. Something is different, unusual compared to what it has been before. I think, one of the most valuable skills in hypnosis is also one of the most valuable skills in health, and that is sensory acuity, paying attention to what's different and then making some kind of reactive response to that. And if the purpose of your communication is the response that you get, well, what if the purpose of your own body is to have the healthiest version possible, and then treat everything as a feedback loop? If you wake up tired, if you eat certain foods and you don't feel as good, then there's a feedback loop to kind of change it. And I think there is a growing trend generationally. My parents are of the age where they don't see any personal responsibility for their health. They will smoke, they will drink, they will eat the worst food. And if they get sick, their version of personal responsibility is going to the doctor and taking whatever they're prescribed. And I think that is changing. Through the generations, there is more education as to the impact of diet, the impact of good sleep, the impact. And 50 years ago, 10 years ago, there wasn't any reliable health trackers. You couldn't see the kind of patterns. You couldn't have the sense of detail that you have now that enables you to make better health choices about your own life. And I think it's never been so empowering for those people that do value health, do value well-being. But again, it would be great to hear you in the audience. Do you have certain things that you do to have that application of sensory acuity? How do you check if things are changing? Or do you have a medical condition, perhaps diabetes or some kind of heart thing, where you're able to read when you're approaching some kind of limit or boundary and make changes as necessary? Raise your hand, we'll get you up on stage. It would be great to hear your points. Should we get a bit woo-woo here? Anyone up on stage currently had some kind of almost sixth sense or intuition that has helped them from a health perspective, either to avoid an injury or to respond to a situation that may actually have improved their health? Any I know I'm throwing this out there quite randomly, but any thoughts from anyone?
I'll take this one, Adam. So the first of all, I think something that I've been wanting to do and trying to do with all the clients that I see and all the people I talk to is get them to change their understanding of the word responsibility to the ability to respond rather than the ownership of the problem. So I think that's a really important thing, and it seems that your parents are maybe in the old camp of what that word means. As far as sort of woo-woo intuition, I actually dreamt 8 months in advance the exact date that my mum would move out of her house and move into a new cottage. So I told one of my clients in Edinburgh that I'd had this dream of her passing away at the house that she lived in. And I know death in dreams is a symbol of shifts and changes in life. And that was the last day that she had in that house. And it was the 23rd of February 2018. And then when I was in hospital, she was in hospital just in her last days of life, really. She'd asked me to go and see her and bring her some grapes. And I had this intuition and bought her some strawberries and prepared them all and cut them all up and took her murder mystery book and sat and read her a chapter of her murder mystery and fed her strawberries and things like that. And that was the night she passed away. And I had intuition when I was driving home in the car that she was going. And when I got home and came into my flat, I got a knock on the door and it was the police saying that she'd passed away. So I think there is these connections that are out of conscious awareness that are something to do with the quantum nature of the universe itself or something like that. They've done tests with this with the HeartMath Institute of people that are close to each other sending healing energy from the hermetically sealed chambers and actually showing changes in the receiver's sort of biofeedback as well as the sender's biofeedback during these moments of sort of transmitting energy healing and things like that. So it's a fascinating area of subject. Ben, did you have something you wanted to say on this as well?
Yeah, so I recently had it with a friend where I literally messaged him out of the blue saying, are you free for a chat later on, as you do. And lo and behold, completely out of the blue, I wasn't aware that some stuff in his family life had been going on as well, to the point where stress, anxiety, not knowing, and it was just weird. It was weird because that happened, and I was just looking at, we had this chat, able to blow it off the shoulders, shall we say. And then a couple of days later, I just check up on something, and I just asked the same question of how everything was, and lo and behold, things have actually progressed in a way as well. And it was just, like I say, it was just nice to know that without anything having to be said, it's like you could just connect with it. And so I suppose the best way to say it is a true friendship, really. That when something like that happens, and it's just, and whether it is just that thing of singing a song and jumping in a car, turning on the radio, and that happens, something. I think the biggest thing is just that when that thing happens, it makes you smile, regardless of what it is. When someone's actually, I've had it in work this week where someone's gone and done a job which I needed to get done, and just thought about it, and it's just, it's just selfless thinking, I think, really. And if something does line up, and I know a few people in my following who've had connections and things to the point where they've actually got to met up with people they've never met because of Zoom and COVID and everything like that, and they've just recently got to met up, and friendships are absolutely, at the highest standard, which I think it is really, really amazing. Even here, like that, for anyone, we also use this on Zoom at the same time. We've never met each other. I know Rowan and I've never met each other, but I've never met either of you. But yeah, I feel so close that I know you really, really well. And it's one of them weird connections that it just works, and it's fantastic like that. So yeah, there's definitely vibes, definitely some sort of woo-woo, whatever it may be, to the point that it works. And if I suppose I was going to finish this on a final message for it, if you've been thinking about messaging someone recently, do it. Because there could be that little thing, there could be something playing on someone's mind. Maybe they just want to have that moment of chat. Maybe you both put something to one side for a little while, or maybe someone's dying to tell someone something, and you can be that person that can assist them. And I know that's kind of teaching people to suck eggs for the industry that we're in, but yeah, just take that little action. Adam, anything from you?
I think in addition, because the flip side of listening to your intuition is when not to listen to your intuition, I think. And sometimes, it will tell you to do certain things out of not necessarily, tapping into this kind of higher insight of your subconscious mind, but it's a vehicle. I mean, anyone that's worked with addicts knows that they've got an inner voice that is constantly telling them that they're going to get so much joy from this particular thing. okay, it's a part of their subconscious mind. Is that intuition? It kind of is in a way. It's the subconscious mind communicating with them. But you've got to look, I think, at sometimes the intention behind some of these parts. And, I think all of us at some point in our life have had self-destructive behavior. That might be drinking too much, eating too much, doing whatever it might be. And there is that preservation or protection part of our subconscious mind. That's where worry comes from. It's trying to keep you safe at some level. And I remember at a point where I started lifting heavier weights, and I had this knot in my chest, and I convinced myself I had cancer at the age of like 21 years old. I had visualizations of me in a hospital bed, like how I was going to kind of like, make things right with certain people and my, last affairs and that kind of stuff. It's fear. I mean, was that intuition? No, it was fear. It was worry. I got it checked out and they just said, oh yeah, you've got a knot. You just need a good massage there and that will go in no problem. But in my head, I was going down a whole different pathway. So, I think there is a danger of blindly following your intuition. And I think, it is a dance. It is a relationship between your conscious and your unconscious mind. And I think, you've got to keep each of them in check. If you're a slave to your conscious mind, that's not good because you can do so much more with your unconscious mind. But equally, if you just let your unconscious mind lead you unfettered, without any kind of barriers, direction or anything like that, well, what if your unconscious mind, and if we agree at some level, it is filtered through values, beliefs and that kind of stuff. If you've got a series of disempowering beliefs, your intuition is going to tell you lots and lots of stuff that maybe isn't so good for your health, isn't so good for your well-being, and is actually making situations worse. So I do think we need to trust our intuition more. But equally, I think if it's a real person, you learn to trust them based on, do they do what they say they're going to do? Are what they're doing helpful in some way? And equally, trust is eroded and diminished if that person in real life, doesn't stick to their word, tries to screw you over, and I think you can't blindly follow your intuition because sometimes it will try and fuck with you, and I think at that point, you've got to have the checks and balances to make sure that you're not a slave to it. And I do think, generally it comes down to anything else. It's the quality of the relationship. I think if you've got a good relationship with your unconscious mind, then you can trust that intuition. But if you don't, then actually it's a good idea to tell yourself to shut up more often than not, because actually it's not going to do you any favors. So, do I think you can listen to your body to heal yourself? Yeah. But how many alcoholics right now have a voice in their head that says it's a good idea to get another beer, get another glass of wine? That's their inner voice. So saying that all intuition is good, well, that's like saying all advice on the internet is good. I mean, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. So we do need an element of a reality check just to say, right, how do we filter out what's useful, what isn't? And that's easier said than done, I think.
I think there's something that I use for this, Adam, and it's the head, heart, gut. So check with your heart. What does your heart say about that? Check with your gut. What does your gut say about that? And it's interesting that we use this language quite a lot in how we deal with and sort of respond to problems in life. Like, oh, that doesn't, I can't swallow that, or that doesn't sit right with me, and things like that. So we're using that in our language. This idea that we take an idea and we effectively digest it and then pass it out and go through that process. And I think you're really right about this idea of intuition not necessarily being trusted, but if you can do that, if you can take it through the heart, take it through the gut and see what that response is within those different areas. And, it's been sort of argued that there is a brain in the heart and a brain in the gut as well as one in the head. But I think over and above that, there's a lot of sort of older cultures like the Hunas in Hawaii, and also the sort of Hermetic traditions as well, of creating an integration in the mind and befriending the low self in the Hawaiian terms for it. And there's actually exercises for creating this rapport with your unconscious mind. Things like doing reviews, asking for the unconscious's favorite memory, starting to communicate with those parts within the unconscious directly, and really the sort of the higher self part that rules over all of the other parts within the body and mind. So I think starting to open up that dialogue's a really important part of training yourself to be able to trust your intuition in that way. Willie, have you got something to say? I know you got cut short the last time we were on, and you popped into the room, so welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, man. I was just listening to you guys, and as far as the intuition and stuff, I could think of many times where just sheer intuition has got me out of many jams. For instance, car wrecks or something, stuff like that. At one point, I was at a stop sign, and the light turned green, but as I got ready to press the gas, something told me to stop. And so I just stopped, and a few seconds later, the car came just flying by there. And I feel like at most times our intuition is like our unconscious, there to protect us and to serve us and to pleasures. And so as I listen to you guys, I'm like, this is all gold from what I hear, because from Graham and Rowan, you guys are very knowledgeable about everything that you've been saying, and it's just I want to say it's just an honor for me to be able to jump on with you guys and listen to you.
Willie, it's an honor to have you here as well. I really appreciate that. And like Rowan said, apologies last time. I know we'd run over, and actually because of that, we've decided to go a little bit longer as well. But that's a fantastic thing, actually, just to know that you had this feeling of stopping, and then something flies past, and I'm sure at that moment, it made you question some things that were going on at that time as well. So thank you very much for sharing.
No problem, anytime.
Willie, I want to know where you get your hat from. That hat is awesome.
From a place called Lids in the mall where I'm at.
I'm going to Google that.
Get them custom made.
That looks awesome. And I would agree with that. I think everyone's had one of those experiences of kind of that level of intuition that seems supernatural, the spidey sense, kind of element. And you don't have to have it very often. I don't think it's something you can rely on, but it's there just enough. You can't explain it, but it's there. And I would agree, it's there to protect, it's there to keep you safe. And I think, what's evident is that, humans are hardwired for survival, and I tell clients this all the time. When they try and get their head around self-destructive behavior, I kind of explain, the human brain is hardwired for survival, not happiness. And sometimes it will prioritize things that will, protect you at some level, even if it creates misery, depression, panic, in the meantime. And, we've got, a fantastic bit of kit inside our brains, but it didn't come with a user manual. We don't know how to actually work it, and we're figuring it out. And I think hypnosis is really helpful for us to harness the power of it. But equally, it's a flawed machine. It's like this very powerful, computer, and we need to kind of have it work for us sometime, because that code that's in there isn't always the best. I can see Steve is raising his hand. Let's get Steve up. And happy birthday for early on in the week, Steve.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm feeling very old now. I was just going to pick up. Hang on. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Yeah. Sorry, no, the little thing didn't go off to say I joined as speaker. Just listening to what Willie had to say there, and I very much agree with that sentiment. But I do think we have to be careful with intuition, especially when it comes to our health. I see intuition as part of the same spectrum as synchronicities. And I don't know if anyone's ever sort of read any of the some of the more in-depth studies on synchronicities. There's a very good one by a guy called Dr. Kirby Surprise. How about that for a name? And he describes synchronicities as being an external reflection of what's going on inside of us. and they're not literal. They're just reflections of what we're thinking and what we're feeling. And I think intuition is kind of like that. I think it's kind of on the same spectrum as well. So, yeah, sometimes the great temptation, of course, is when we get this feeling and we act upon it and we see that coming true, then we think, oh, great, that's something I can trust all the time. But I think that could be very, very misleading. And I look at a lot of people who say, oh, I always trust my gut instinct. And I don't mean to sound unkind, but sometimes you look at the rest of their life and you think, really? How's that worked out for you then? I think you've got to take this in light and shade.
I totally agree there, Steve. I think that the synchronicity thing is really important to know that this is a marker of your unconscious communicating with you and not something really to be looking for around you. And this is something that's taught in the sort of mystery tradition schools about this as well, is when you start noticing those synchronicities, just notice that it's your mind opening up and giving you these signals. If you want to call it the sort of divine mind speaking to you through synchronicities, through intuition and things like that. But it's something to be noted and ignored and carry on with what you're doing rather than something to be looked for. Because as soon as you start looking for it, you start getting mixed signals, you start getting sort of mixed messages from it.
Yeah, it's the double-edged sword, isn't it, of intuition and listening to your body. But I would say intuition is one part of listening to your body. Pain we've not really talked about, but I think pain is a signal from our bodies. And I know, Graham, you've done some protocols that look at pain and removing pain, and at the most basic level, isn't pain telling you there is something wrong with your body, and perhaps telling you need to rest, need to get help, need to get a bone fixed or medical attention or something like that? And at the most basic level, I think, is there a positive intention behind pain? Totally, there is. I think there's a reason why we've got all the nerves all over our body, so that, we protect ourselves. And if you look, I forget what it's called, but there is a particular medical condition where people don't feel any pain and they're losing fingers, they're constantly cutting themselves. It's desirable at a very basic level to have pain. And surely that's listening to your body to heal yourself. You've hurt yourself. It was 2-3 weeks ago, I started doing more cardio and I managed to twist my ankle and it swelled up really bad. I was limping, there was pain. What did I do to listen to my body to heal myself? Yeah, took the pressure off, started doing more upper body work, not putting pressure on my ankle, let it recover. And I think at the most basic level, listening to your body to heal yourself is kind of obvious. Feel pain, respond to it, rest, relax, recuperate. Don't keep doing those things. That protocol, was it Pain to Go that you learned, Graham? Do you want to talk a bit about that? And because I think one of the things that is frustrating for people is sometimes when pain is persistent, but the positive intention that originally it was designed to do has long gone. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, so it's all Pain to Go. I studied with Stephen Blake at his home. Myself and a few friends took part there. And it's the process of being able to talk to the brain and doing something that Steve created called brain bargaining. I'm not going to go into it too much because obviously it's not necessarily mine to share. But yeah, to be able to create basically a deal of how things are going to work. And a good example, I had a friend who was with me last weekend who regularly suffers with back pain, back spasms, to the point where he's actually having multiple drugs to be able to calm his back down, a bit more as a preventative because it happens quite regularly. And I just said, have you ever tried anything else? Because one of the things he stated is how he'd been to a masseuse before and she'd made it feel better, but it was very, very temporarily. So I literally went through the whole protocol of all Pain to Go, and lo and behold, that day he never required any drugs, which for me is a win. Don't know, I haven't actually checked in with him. I should see him tomorrow just to see how he gets on. Very simple, very quick process. Could you use other modalities? Absolutely. But I think the simplicity and the methodology which is imported into all Pain to Go really does create it. So if anyone's not aware, Stephen Blake always brings in a real client. The think person was so Stephen lives up in Leicester, and the person had travelled about 2 hours to get to him. Now this person was nigh on crippled with fibromyalgia. She was really limp, and then she went through the whole process. And I tell you what, the girl that jumped out that chair was a different lady. It was literally a jaw drop moment. So clearly that sort of thing for me was the ultimate buy-in. And yeah, like I say, all I can suggest is if anyone's interested or not knowing too much, let me know. I have got an interview with Stephen Blake on my meetups if someone wants to watch it. But yeah, it is a good protocol. I like it. Like I say, I have done similar with other protocols too. Shifting that. So yeah, there's multitude. What about you guys, or anyone else who's in the audience?
I think that, like, from doing the Vipassana meditation, I was just recovering from having all my lung problems at that point, and something that came up with me in regards to pain, and like I've suffered from cluster headaches from the age of about 15, so I've dealt with a lot of neurological pain and physical pain through my life as a result of these things. And also my mum, one of the reasons I got into hypnosis was her osteoporosis and osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, so she'd dealt with a lot of pain, and I used to use the control room technique for her and just turn it down, and she could just not bother taking any meds that day if she did that technique. But when I was doing the meditation, one of the things that came up for me was the idea that pain itself is actually just a group of sensations, and it's to do with the context and location of those sensations that actually starts triggering the pain centers within the brain. So you can feel the sensations without having the perception of pain, because pain's a perception rather than a sensation. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at this, because the sensations are always going to be there, you know, if the nerves are sending those signals. But whether our brain actually frames that as pain or not is largely due to how we are representing that group of sensations within our mind. And to give a good example of this, the throbbing and heat and pressure associated with toothache could be seen to be quite pleasurable in some other areas of your body. So, you know, it's one of those things that we can sort of look at and go, you know, are these sensations, if we start to break them down into their elements of sort of heat, coolness being fire, pressure being earth, a sort of pulsing being water, and any tingling being air, and look at them in their elemental forms, we start to actually be being aware of the sensations rather than allowing them to get to that stage of perception. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, you know, the submodalities of pain is a very active part of hypnobirthing, isn't it? You know, it's kind of taking out the element of or the presupposition of pain and discomfort and interpreting it as sensations. And clearly that works. I think, you know, the hypnobirthing, you know, I've never done it myself, but it's a huge, you know, growth area. I know people that teach it and do that. And, you know, at some level, we also know that people wearing white coats have more power of suggestion, you know, from that. So, you know, it does seem highly likely that for decades, well-intentioned nurses, midwives and doctors have been giving post-hypnotic or current suggestions of pain. You know, would you like an epidural? Has a presupposition that your body can't cope with the pain that you're about to experience. I mean, you know, these are powerful suggestions, and I think hypnobirthing is balancing that out with a different perspective. So, you know, if you've got, you know, a major thing like a pregnancy and labor, why wouldn't those same kind of techniques and using metaphors such as elemental, you know, elements is I think is fantastic, because you have different associations to those things than you do with the, you know, the given that, you know, something is bad, you know, and isn't that what happens when you have people with a fear of blood? You know, they have an association in their mind that blood equals danger, pain, they can't cope, and then they catastrophize at some level. So all of these things are associations. Mainly, we've been talking so far, I think, about listening to your body to heal yourself physically. But of course, there is the flip side of that, which is listening to body to heal yourself potentially emotionally or potentially mentally, because a lot of mental or emotional issues manifest themselves sometimes in physical sensations and things. I've seen several people with skin conditions or bumps and lumps that are clearly not down to a physical issue of themselves, but it's a manifestation of something else. Isn't that what self-harm is? People desperate to try and create a physical representation of internal pain or distress at some level. But before we go into the mental health side of things, Steve, you raised your hand to come back up on stage. Was there something you wanted to add to this conversation?
Yeah, it was really just something Rowan was saying about old pain to go, and I've got no experience of that. But about 6 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune disease. Basically, your nervous, your immune system starts attacking your nervous system at the neuromuscular level, and it starts off with very often with the eyes. So my right eye is permanently closed at the moment. My left eye is about halfway closed. So I'm working on about 30% vision at the moment, and after about 10 minutes of even moderate activity, my neck is aching. I've got extreme exhaustion. And of course, trying to see clients, and I work in quite a high energy capacity with my clients. That's been problematic. So I've always been in, we've discussed this before, I've always been into ego state work and parts work. And this idea that Rowan mentioned about bargaining, and I elicited the part of me that was running the myasthenia gravis, and I personified that and after its positive intention and all this sort of thing. And I was bargaining with that. I was saying to this part, look, we've got to keep on working somehow. We've got to keep the money rolling in. What can we do if I work and then have a break and then see another client maybe 40 minutes later, sort of break things up a little bit? Would you be happy to go along with that until we can find something as a more permanent solution? And I got the answer back, yes, it would, but it wanted something else in return. But it didn't seem to want to tell me at the time what that was. And it came to me in a dream about 2 or 3 days later. And it was about slowing down in general and appreciating what I've got more in general. And this loops back to something which was said right at the beginning of this conversation about the attitude of gratitude, which is an expression that normally makes me want to vomit. But I think if you take it in the right context, I think it's about an appreciation of our assets, things we have got, the things we can do, rather than all the things that we can't do and the things that we haven't got. And I've been putting a lot of work in on that as well over the last little while. And it's starting to show some benefits. So thank you for Rowan for mentioning that. That sort of prompted that with me.
Can I just come back to you on that Steve? I think this attitude of gratitude it's something that sits quite a lot with me, in this idea that we have to be grateful for everything, for the learnings and the gifts that we get from that unconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, even if you want to refer to it as the universe, if you want to go down that road. It is in some respects our entire universe, because we do create our whole world within our mind. So, being grateful for everything, both the gifts and the lessons and the illness as well. It was a big shift in my recovery, was, seeing the fungal infection I got in my lungs as being basically a kick up the ass by the universe or my universe to make the shifts that I needed to make in my life, to, take my health into consideration, to change my diet, to change my exercise routine, to start doing the breathwork stuff properly and get into my yoga properly instead of just sort of in a half-assed manner, So I think that this, while the sort of term, the attitude of gratitude, is a little bit of a sort of overused in some respects and used only in a positive light in some respects as well, I think it's a wonderful one. And the fact that it rhymes just makes it stick, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, I think that's something which we can all um, involve ourselves in a little bit more. I think, and it's something which I'm doing a lot more with my clients now as a result of this illness. And as I say, I've always shied away from that expression, the attitude of gratitude. But when we reframe it in the right way and present it to people, I think they go, yeah, I see what that's about now. It's not about some schmaltzy, salesy type thing. There's actually something very good in that.
I certainly think so, because there is such a from the personal development point of view, there is that kind of pretentious, kind of overly positive, kind of, I'm feeling great, and it's just kind of like, whereas, Rowan's point that you can be grateful for even trauma or distress or a problem, I think particularly for the Brits that aren't, naturally wired for, hey, have a nice day. It gives us the ability to, I think, to take something of value. And that's why I look at gratitude as it's extracting value from situations or experiences and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I have an issue with the kind of too much of the kind of the Tony Robbins, everything's great. I resist that, but at the same time, what's the flip side of gratitude? It's kind of entitlement, it's kind of resentment, it's all these unpleasant things. So I don't think it has to be, that other, side. You can be grateful for so many different things, and particularly, I think a really good tool to get grateful, if that isn't naturally your tendency, is to think, how would you be if you didn't have that thing? How would you be if, you can be grateful for your eyes just by thinking, what if you were blind? Grateful for your legs or your toes if you didn't have them. I think that's quite a useful tool to instantly. Some people say, I can't think of 5 things to be grateful for. Yeah, you can. What if you lost 5 of the most important things in your life? You'd be incredibly grateful if you had them back. So that's a nice little tool there. Graham, I talked over you just as you were about to say something. So
I'm getting used to it now.
It's because you're quiet coming through my headphones.
I'm slowly getting used to it. No, mate, it's fine. It's fine. And I was pretty much saying the same. Steve, thank you very much for them points. And yeah, I really like what you just said there. 5 things that you're grateful of, and when they say no, putting them points out. No, it's really, really good, and some great conversation. It's great to see over the course of this year, just the conversations that we've been having week in, week out. And so for me personally, I'm very, very grateful of that. Doreen, I see you come up on the stage. Please share with us whatever it is you wish to share.
Well, it's just want to say that if you're in pain or if you're ill, that there's a tendency to dislike whatever is going on, but so all the idea of appreciation or gratitude towards your body is just fading, and I think that makes it a lot worse, your disease or your pain or whatever it is, because on one hand you're focusing on that pain, which is obviously there, and so it gets worse because everything you focus on gets worse. And so there's more lack of appreciation or gratitude, however you call it. So yeah, that's definitely a thing that is going on, and it's a loop as well. It's a vicious cycle, and that just cuts you off from who you really are. That gets you into a state of that everything is just hopeless and helpless, and it's just one of those things, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for that, because I've just had a client this evening who's doing exactly that sort of thing right now, trying to, unfortunately, comes following having a COVID injection, just feels the worst of himself or worrying, and lo and behold, the more he worries, the worse it gets. So yeah, I think we all as therapists have all experienced people in them loops, and yeah, definitely it is our duty or our responsibility to hopefully of that. Do you know what? I've just looked at the time as well. I can't believe how fast this evening's going.
Yeah, but some other things I want to say is that very often the physical pain is just an expression of the emotional pain that is not being expressed. So lots of people have early trauma, and obviously been hidden somewhere in evaded ego state, and it's not being dealt with, and then the physical body is expressing the emotional pain.
I think that's right. There is this link that I mentioned earlier about certain traumas being associated with certain diseases in the body, and things like griefs associated with lung problems and things like that. And I had my lung problems after losing my father, ties in again. So I think there's a lot of this where the pain in the body or the pain in the mind causes pain in the body, and the same way around, like the other way around, that the pain in the body can cause pain within the mind as well. And really, the pain or discomfort, whether that's emotional or physical, is that message from the body telling us something. The same way as pleasure in the body or in the mind is telling us something. So with this sort of pleasure and pain balance within our body, we can start to get that communication opened up with the unconscious if we start actually looking at it. So this is something about pain itself is, yes, if we focus on the pain, like we can potentially make it worse because we're putting our attention on it. But if we look through it to find out what's behind the pain, that's where we start to have shifts, I think. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of part of this whole conversation, isn't it, about the kind of link, between, the mental side, the physical side. And I think what we're all in agreement there is that it's symbiotic. When there are emotional issues, psychological issues, unresolved issues at some level, very often that either has a physical manifestation in terms of health, well-being, or low energy or something like that, or it can prompt the coping mechanisms that then could lead to poor health. And, particularly in the UK, how many people use alcohol as the primary tool to deal with stress? Well, if we say that stress is a mental, issue, if you define it as demands exceed resources, well, having alcohol, it doesn't make you more resourceful. It simply either distracts you or numbs the feeling of overwhelm, and that's a coping mechanism. Or in many cases, I mean, we've talked about ego states there. Alcohol is a useful anchor to get a different ego state in the executive that couldn't care less about the stress. And it's simply a way to kind of access a different part of the subconscious mind. So, yeah, we've talked a lot about physical issues and mental issues, and anxiety, I think, is also one of those things that is dealt with physically. If people are anxious, you have a physiological response to that, gets people on edge. Number one, in my experience, number one way people deal with anxiety is avoidance. Second thing is self-medication. So if you've got these kind of, I would, if we did any basic research here, mental health charity like Mind or something like that, I don't think stress levels have ever been higher. I don't think anxiety levels have ever been higher than they are. And then you've got people, using food, alcohol, and drugs as a way of self-medication. Well, what's the side effect of that? A decline in physical health. What's one of the top three worries? I would say money, relationships, and health are going to be the top three worries generally for most people. So to deal with stress and anxiety, people are drinking more, eating more, taking more drugs. That affects their physical health, and then they worry about that, and then the cycle continues. And I think we're in a unique position as hypnotherapists to show them alternative ways. That actually food, drink, drugs doesn't have to be the way that you deal with these mental issues. And actually, let's look at stress as the primary way. If we do define stress as demands exceed resources, well, hypnosis is a pretty good tool to make people feel more resourceful and evaluate demands in a way that they're more achievable. Well, that's a very good way to reduce stress. And if you don't feel stressed and overwhelmed, then you don't need the coping mechanisms like drink, drugs, food to cope with to begin with. And I think we're in a unique position to get to the root cause of what has a ripple effect to all these health conditions that happen later. So, I think we're in a really important role here to have an impact on, the overall health of the nation if we perceive ourselves to. And I think not every hypnotherapist realizes, how much of an impact we can have. We don't want to fall into the trap of just doing what the GPs do, and that is symptom manage. Oh, you're feeling stress, well, listen to this audio and that will reduce your stress temporarily. I think we've got a responsibility to get to the root cause, break those patterns, help people escape these loops, and then they don't have to go back to that self-destructive behavior that caused it to begin with. And that, I think, is the big opportunity there. I don't know if there's any kind of disagreement there, but that's my take on it.
Well, if I may say, I heard the expression today that if in the state that the world is in these times, if you're not depressed, you need therapy.
Yeah, the gym is my therapy, Doreen. I'm definitely not depressed. But I think it's.
But do you understand what I mean? If
do.
You're not depressed, and the way the state is. I mean, I'm not saying you need to be depressed, but lots of people just don't care anymore, and I think that's way worse than being depressed. And of course,
I would agree with
depression has its own place, and it's much easily cured. But if you just don't care anymore, that's why you need therapy, because these days are just, the state of the world is just really depressing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the tenets of NLP, we get to our unconscious mind is deciding what we focus on, but equally what we delete, what we generalize, and you said it yourself, Doreen. Whatever. If you focus on pain, you get more pain. And I think if we gave each of us a bit of homework and we said, right, I want you all to think of 100 things in the world to feel depressed about, we could do that in half an hour. Equally, if we could think of 100 things to be really grateful for and empowered by and excited by, we could probably do that too. And I think that's the key difference, I think, to those people that everyone gets depressed every now and then. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a natural human reaction to circumstances sometimes. It's only a problem if you get stuck there. But the point I think you're making there, Doreen, is that there is no shortage of things to feel sad about, stressed about, anxious about. We're in a very volatile world at a very uncertain time. And therefore, if you focus on those things, it's very, very traumatizing. And I think a lot of the general public don't have the same coping strategies as maybe hypnotherapists. And I remember having a talk with my team in my PR company one day prior to the lockdown. And I said, look, we're going to go through a really volatile time, and we've got every excuse lined up if we want it. Some clients are going to go bust. Some clients that said they're going to work with us aren't going to work with us. We've got every excuse lined up, and we can either use those excuses to justify failure, or we can accept that it's a shitty time and things aren't going to go right, and we can accept that and just take responsibility for what we're in control of. And I think it was that approach generally to the whole pandemic that actually meant that, I was able to take risks and do things while everyone was kind of battening down the hatches. I was taking opportunities during that time because I trusted my ability to be resilient and resourceful in a time of volatility. And I don't think most people had that approach, because when you're driven by fear, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, all that adrenaline, cortisol, it makes you want to hide, it makes you want to run away, it makes you want to kind of batten down the hatches. One of the harsh realities that I think a lot of people don't want to accept, though, is that volatility and change and uncertainty actually brings a lot of opportunities. And I think for hypnotherapists, the fact that there is this kind of huge mental health backlog, that people are stressed right now, they're anxious right now, they're depressed right now, that's a great opportunity for us as hypnotherapists to go out there and make a difference in the world. You know, this is almost the perfect time for us to be doing what we're doing. But I think we need to be more vocal about it, more confident about it, and let people know that we're here to help, is my take on it. But I don't think it's a predetermined outcome of volatile times that we have to be depressed. I think at some level that is a choice that we get to make for ourselves. And I appreciate we're coming up to the end. We've only got about 8 minutes. So if you are in the audience and you've been wanting to say something all this time, please raise your hand, because we probably have time for one more person up on the stage. If you have something you do want to share or something you do want to ask. But I appreciate I've been talking too much here. So Graham, over to you so you can take the mic.
No, I think you had it right on ball there, and how we concentrate on everything to make our for everything to have concentration, because at the end of the day, the devil makes it idle hands, or it gets the brain thinking, and the more we get the brain thinking, exactly what Dorian said before, you go into that negative loop, and the negative loop gets stronger and stronger. And I always use with anxiety clients that the hypothesis is that anxiety never goes away; it only ever doubles. Well, it doesn't. Sorry, not that it never goes away. It only ever doubles when when you don't want it. So, for example, something starts. Next time it comes, because it already realizes how it was last time. It duplicates it forward. You've got that stuff on top, and so on and so forth. To the point it becomes like a big snowball. You're pushing around, and more stuff than what the original anxiety was gets stuck to that snowball. And obviously you've got to find your way to pour it out and allow them other things to drop out. And I think tonight's been a really good chat, actually. The way everyone's come in and put everything across, personal experiences from Rowan, and everyone else who's joined up, and even with Steve, with everything that's going on with him. I think we're creating one hell of a brilliant audience, and for me and seeing. We massively appreciate it, because we all take something away from this as well. So thank you for that. Rowan, have you got anything?
I think just off the back of what you were saying, this a lot of this, things that we do, if we're speaking, like if we're using it working with a client that's got like nightmares or something like that. If we speak to that part that's creating the nightmare and ask it to show them in a different way, in a different dream, we can quite often get that nightmare to change. And I think that gives us a nice little model for this speaking to and listening to your body, is opening that dialogue with the mind and being grateful for the things that you're given and the things that are going well for you. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling low, I know Adam's talked to me about this before. I'm not sure if it was online or not, but this idea of having a list of the things that we're happy about, the things that we've achieved in our life. And I used to have a little list of things like this as well, where all the things that I'm proud of doing or I'm glad that I've managed to achieve in my life. And that pulls me out of a funk if I happen to be in a funk, or if I'm feeling that I'm not good enough in some area. I can look at that list and go, wait a second, I've achieved all this in my life so far. And I think the same can be said for sort of working with gratitude and speaking to that body mind and getting responses back from it about your health, mental or physical, and your direction in life as well. So I think, feeling the body, but also checking with the mind and checking with the heart, checking with the gut, and going through that process can be a really powerful way of starting to really allow yourself to listen to your body in a beneficial way, but trying to sort of mitigate any possibility or any dangers of getting bad signals from that part of your mind, because they do happen, and we all know that.
I tell you what, Rowan, Joe, I've just noticed on here as well, this book that we've got looked at. I'm going to try this out. Did you all hear that?
Not at all.
No. Is it just me? So it's got a class. Oh, actually, wait then. There we go.
There we go.
I think you absolutely just put that, and we still need to get your jingle sorted, Adam. But I think you just summarise in the best possible way there at the end. So yeah, I think that's bang on. And as always, thank you for joining us. I'm just going to quickly pull up here because we have actually got what we're going to be talking about next week. I'll be making this confidence in hypnosis. That's a very key subject. So if that's something that interests you for next week, 9 p.m. here, be ready and come along and join us. Adam, anything for the closing word?
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate everyone that's come up on stage and shared their points or questions. Thanks for everyone in the audience. Really appreciate you spending the time with us to talk about how we listen to the intuition, how we listen to the body. I think healing is something that we're all personally responsible for. So this has been a fantastic, fascinating conversation with everyone. So I really appreciate your time and your effort. And just to echo what Graham was saying there, next week we're going to be talking about confidence in hypnosis. For those of you NLP trained, you'll hear the ambiguity there. Do we mean confidence as hypnotists, or do we mean hypnosis to give you confidence? We'll let you be the judge of that next week when we talk about confidence in hypnosis. But thank you all for joining today, and all things going well. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.